like to hear someone reading about you?
I think it feels differently after reading those Goodreads reviews. You know?
Yeah.
Because when I first was reading it, when you were writing and you kind of going back and forth and editing and things, I was like, this is accurate, you know? It's like captures me and, you know, the other people I know. And I still feel that way. I just feel like now I know that a lot of people think I'm obnoxious.
Well, just that one Sam from Goodreads.
No, there's more than that. Don't read it.
I had to block it on my browser. I can't look at
strange.
it. Yeah.
It's very strange. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be friends with those people either.
Right.
But
No, I bet Sam from Goodreads is like a little narcissistic and performative.
probably. Probably. So much of life. All of life is projection, right? We were talking about this when at the workshop at the Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And I sort of had this analogy of like, you know, you can take a picture of somebody, and you can take a flattering picture of somebody, but it can still be accurate. Or you can take a picture that's really unflattering.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can take a picture and you can like filter it and Photoshop it to the point where it's not quite accurate either, right? So you can make somebody look better or worse depending on kind of what you want to do there.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, you know, at least for me, you know, you've captured me. It's very surreal also reading all those transcripts of the wild shit that I say. But, you know, it's like, it's accurate, and I stand behind that. I believe in authenticity.
Yeah.
Even if it's unflattering at times. But it is surreal to have that kind of like picked apart by people.
Yeah.
But so be it.
Yeah. I think it's in poor taste to criticize a person in their grief, regardless of what that looks like or how obnoxious you think they're behaving.
Probably we don't have an aligned value system.
I don't think so. No, I don't think we'd be friends with those people.
Yeah. What's it like creating characters out of people that you actually know?
Also really complicated. I mean, with you, we were talking towards the end of the writing process. We were talking like almost every day. We still talk like almost every day. So I feel like, you know, I could keep you up to date on the writing process and everything. Other people I didn't talk to as often, and so I wasn't keeping them as up to date, and there were complications that happened with that. You know, people forget what they say, or they disagree with the way they said something the first time, or they forgot they even talked to you, and you know, and they suddenly feel really emotional about it, and you know, they don't want to be in the book anymore. And these are, I mean, everybody, most of the people in this book are either people that I knew previously or that I was introduced to along the way. So they're all people I know, right? Oh, there's a bike rally outside. Awesome. Empower the people. Yeah. Philly is like a really bike-friendly city.
No.
That's why they're around.
Some cyclist was killed recently near here.
Oh, really?
We're enthusiastic about
Enthusiastic about bikes, maybe not.
We want bike
Yeah.
infrastructure. Our mayor doesn't want to help us at all,
No.
or anyone.
Sorry. Well, thanks. Yeah, so it got complicated and emotional towards the end. And writing about people, I mean, it's also, you know, like you said, like describing somebody, there's always some context that is left out.
There's always somebody, no matter how great of a picture you take of them, they're like, oh, that's terrible of me.
Aren't they gonna?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
So.
exactly. So, but through the editorial process, I mean, this book went through many, many, many drafts.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, like I didn't know it was going to be a book originally. I thought maybe it would be an article, or maybe it could be a book, but I hadn't really made up my mind yet. And then the story just became so big, and I kept talking to more and more people, and at a certain point I felt really overwhelmed with the amount of material that I had.
How many people did you have?
Like 175 people. Yeah, it was, and like somewhere in the realm of like 130 something ended up in the book. So, you know, like many people were like, they didn't want to talk on the record, or they didn't end up being necessary to the story, so I left them out. Or it became like sort of a side project that I'm still working on, that I'm using those things for. And yeah, I mean, and already I think, you know, the book is quite long, and when at a certain stage I thought I would write it as an oral history, and this is actually your suggestion, because you were also
I had
noticing.
just read Daisy Jones in the 6th.
Yeah.
This would be fun.
But then I read Daisy Jones in the 6th, and I was like, this is really fun. Like, let's do it.
But she's doing fiction. I think it's a
Yeah.
lot harder to do it with
Well, there's just like,
using real quotes.
yeah, there's that, and then there's just like so much information in this book. Like with fiction, you can keep it really narrow. Like the focus can be just on this small cast.
Yeah.
This cast is like huge, and
Yeah.
there's so much other information that has to come in from like news articles and archival reporting, and
Yeah, and I mean, it was your editor that had said no. I remember this because you
Yeah.
were like freaking out. You were like, they don't want to let me do an oral history.
Yeah.
And you were really kind of upset about it, but they insisted, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Aaron actually that did it,
Yeah.
like the editor. That was like, we really want to hear your narrative voice,
Yeah.
like tying this together, synthesizing the information. And I was like team oral history, but after reading that,
Mhm.
I was like, you know, I think they have a point, having
Yeah.
like really thought that what you did with Sunshine State was so interesting,
Mhm.
and you know, being able to just really put the story together,
Mhm.
and you know, and they were so right,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yes. Erin like saved this book from the brink a number of times, because also, so she told me to write it in this traditional journalistic style, which I did, and then the manuscript originally was like 550 pages, and she had just, okay, so the context for me thinking that was an okay length was Erin had also edited the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, which was like 750 pages or something. And I was like, but you did it with Honore. And she was like, that was an accident.
And you kept saying to me, like, this book is going to be like so long, but you were like not appropriately like afraid of that. And I was like, being like, nobody's gonna fucking want to read that.
Yeah.
Like, and I kept like trying to figure out different ways to be like, there's only so much information like
Yeah.
the brain can hold.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And like, I should like send Erin a fruit basket. 'Cause she did some real magic.
It
Like,
does. It takes a certain, it's a high skill.
to be able to like,
Yeah.
cause I read other versions of it and
Yeah.
sections of other versions of it, and there were like, I'm not an editor, I don't have that skill, and I would be like, why are you writing about this? Like, you know, this should just like if it was up to me, I would have just like cut it all together.
Mhm.
But when I read the final version, it's still there. It's just
Mhm.
like so succinct and hits the notes without like losing the beat that you were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that's like all thanks to Erin Wicks, right?
I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
To
You need an editor.
Yeah,
I read a
I really
book where
did.
they didn't have a good editor.
Oh yeah, it's really obvious. So I ended up cutting a lot, and I had even, I mean, this is also why you need an editor, because I had showed that long manuscript to some other people. Like my dad is also a writer. I showed it to one of Carolyn's ex-boyfriends, who's a friend of mine from high school, who's in the book. And he was like, I think you need to put more of yourself in there. And I was like, but it's already so long. And I mean, he was right, but also he was wrong. Like, cut 200 pages and then maybe say a little more in your own voice. But first, we needed to cut it down. I think because also it makes it easier to see what's important.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, without losing anybody.
Yeah.
And also because you could write a person's life story endlessly. There's no end to the, expansiveness of her as a person. So it was hard to be selective though.
Yeah.
What were the things that was anything cut that you thought was
I
should've been
meant it
kept?
when I say that I didn't really notice, like, because the beats are still there. But, to give an example, and probably you guys haven't read it yet since it just came out, but, you put some context in there, and so you talk about, like, the race riots in St. Pete, and my immediate, for context, what year was that, 96? Yeah, I remember vaguely that it happened.
Mhm.
We grew up in a suburb of St. Petersburg that's very white and very boring. And so my response to that was like, that doesn't have anything to do with us. Well, that's the point, right? Because we're segregated from that stuff,
Yeah.
and that becomes like relevant as you sort of unpack other things later on. But my response was like, well, that didn't affect us at all. But it gives really, really interesting and important sort of like context and background that my initial response was it's irrelevant. And what really needed to happen was that it just needed to kind of be pared down, pulled back to her. And
Yeah,
you
and
know.
that passage was originally like 8 or 10 pages long, and Erin actually told me to cut it down to no more than 2 pages. And I was like, but all of this, I had done so much reading about the event that sparked the race riots in '96 in St. Petersburg that I could no longer really see what was most important to include there, and I was kind of including everything. But when it's nice to have a challenge. When she gave me the challenge to get it down to like 2 pages, I really started to look at every single word that I had written, and like even cutting like 1 or 2 words from each sentence makes a huge difference. It cut out like a good chunk of that. So yeah. What's your favorite passage?
Probably talking about like that, the St. Pete, like when Carrie was 17 and like the bike scene stuff and.
Will you tell them a bit about that summer when you guys founded the skirt? They founded an all-girl bike gang, so it's actually kind of beautiful that we had this like.
I'm feeling embarrassed. I still am like, was I too old to be acting that way? But so at the time, this was like 2007 to 2007, and Jenny, her sister, right? She moves to Portland, and Carrie was in a collegiate high school program, and her parents were divorced and sort of like not micromanaging her. So she basically lived with me, and I was sort of like in charge of keeping an eye on her, I guess. And she got a bike, a Nashiki, and converted it into a fixed gear because like everybody was doing that, or at least all like the guys were doing that. And I sort of like used it, like I wanted to do it myself, but like I was like 23 and I was like, I'm too old for this. But then she did it and I was like, well, I'll do it because I have to like look after her. And it was my excuse, right? And but it was really, really fun. And so there weren't a lot of girls that were riding bikes, and so we had this idea of like, because the guys would have, like their races and their rides, but there was like not a lot of community around girls that maybe wanted to do it, but like were nervous, so we created this thing called the skirts, and we like did little workshops where we taught people how to change their tire, their tube, and we did rides and some alley cat races and stuff, and like raised money for a domestic abuse shelter in the area. We like sold cupcakes, and it was really a blast. Yeah, we made like little smoke cards and stuff. But it was a really fun moment. I think also 2007 is like a really special moment because it's like before smartphones. So like I'm not the first person to talk about this, but like there was a different way that people were kind of experiencing one another because they weren't on their phone like, what else is happening that I might need to go to? I felt like there was like more, you were more present and there was more like activities, or maybe it was just because I was younger, but like it's this really special moment in time for me, and like it's really cool. I feel like that it's like captured, and that was really formative in Carrie and I's friendship because I knew her since she was 6, but that and the fact that Jenny was gone, like we really bonded, and then of course we both moved to New York, and so it was sort of like really the start of a chapter in our lives.
A turning point in her life.
A turning point, yeah.
Yeah, in your life too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Do you guys want to ask any questions? Yeah.
Jordan.
First.
Are you sure? Okay. We're both from Long Island. I just need to
Okay.
point this out.
Hey.
This is why we're first here. I'm so sorry, Laura Cover. Yeah, I'm so excited about this because I think the beautiful challenge of trying to make this oral history and just the scope of it is really astonishing. And so I was excited to read about this person through a certain lens. And so really special. I love Emma, and that would have been great too, but it's really special and unique to have both of you doing this tonight.
Right?
So just really cool, thank you, because it's scary. But I wonder about the scope of the book, and I guess your process, considering how much you whittled down, but like how you organized everything, and how you also knew what the goalpost was at the end structurally for the book.
I wanted the book to start and end with Carolyn alive. So on the last page of the book, she's alive. It's a few months before she dies in 2016. So it kind of makes a circle. It starts in 2016, ends back in 2016. And I also knew that I wanted to tell her whole life story. So I had to go out and find people who knew parts of her story. Nobody knows the entirety of someone's story. So I had to find a lot of different people to tell me the different parts. And there were so many more people that I could have talked to or should have talked to, and I just couldn't interview every single person that she'd ever met, although I kind of like set that as a goal at some point. And then I also knew I'd have to talk about the trial because we were both attending the trial, and part of my focus for the book was how this event reverberated through Carolyn's social world and affected, how it continued affecting people for years afterward. So there are some characters who come in really early on, like Gabe, you met in that first chapter, Pamela, Jenny, and we continue following those people through the book. And then also the people from Wendy's Subway, I went and interviewed all of them, and we see how they're reacting to it. And I was just curious, like, how people survive grief, a lot of them made art or wrote about her. Other people just sort of like curled inward and became very reclusive, or wanted to avoid that subject altogether. Other people got really angry, and some of us attended the trial just to be present for Carolyn's, just to remind people in the courtroom that like there is a victim here. So they reacted that way. I tried to find some justice in a way, and so there ended up being like 4 timelines in the book. One of them is Carolyn's life story. One of them is the days leading up to the trial, which kind of get woven in with the trial. And then the last one is what did I say? Carolyn's life story, the trial, the days leading up to it, and Render. I forgot about him. But he doesn't actually come in. We learn about him kind of along the way, but his individual story doesn't really. We don't focus on him really until near the end, like the last third of the book, because I really wanted to de-emphasize him.
Yeah, I feel like my question is related. So you had mentioned before how you had one of Carolyn's ex-boyfriends who you were friends with read the book, and he said there should be more of you in it.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you could talk a bit about how you how you landed on how much of yourself and your relationship with Carolyn to include in the book, like where your voice comes out more in your
Well, so the book opens actually with this moment upon Pamela's suggestion, because it originally opened with another of Carolyn's close friends, Adjoa, who had talked to her the day before over Facebook Messenger, and they had arranged to do this like healing herb handoff, like exchange, because Carolyn was getting rid of a bunch of herbs that she wasn't using, and Adjoa is very into botanicals. And I thought, you know, like the plants will become so metaphorical in the book, and we can really build on this, and, you know, symbol, this, I don't know, extended metaphor, and Adjoa was close to Carolyn, but she wasn't the closest person to Carolyn. So Pamela suggested, why don't you open with Jenny in town? And then of course Pamela's in this scene too. They're like the two, you know, people who have known Carolyn the longest, other than her parents, like in the book. So, and I'm getting around to answering your question. So then that passage with Adjoa was kind of moved later, and it was a good point, because what I ended up doing was sort of spiraling outward into her social circle, and you know, some people only appear for like a couple of pages and then we never see them again, you know. Some people are there for the whole book, and I am there I'm one of those like there for a couple of pages people, because I didn't know her as long as other people did, and we weren't as close as she was with other people. So, and I just wasn't there for a lot of what happens in the book. So there's not a reason for me to be in the scene, you know. So, but there are some scenes with me in there where I'm hanging out with her. You know, she comes to my book club meeting. We meet up for wine at one point. You know, we're like, I was there in the beginning of Wendy's Subway, like helping them sand the floors because they were really splintery and unfinished, and you know, so like I know what it feels like to be in this room that she spent all this time in, but I couldn't, you know, I was not an authority on like her inner world like other people were, so I spent a lot more time with those people.
Hi. When you asked that question, or when you made that comment, and when you asked that question, I was thinking along the lines of like, in addition to you as a presence, as a person in the story of this, you know, social network, also you as like the voice or the kind of the narration. Yeah. Is that, to what extent did the friend mean that versus like you as a character, so to speak?
That's true. I think that's what he meant, like do actually some more interpretation.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I feel like I was very like fact oriented writing this book, and I think I did end up adding a little bit more, but not much. And I really just kind of let the facts speak for themselves. And it seems like people are getting it. You know, like I don't think they need me to step in and be like, this person's a misogynist, like, duh, you know. So, and I think at a certain point, like the reader has to meet you halfway, and you know, I want to give readers a chance to do that instead of like telling them what to think, you know, or how to interpret the facts. And yeah, I mean, but there were some inspired passages where I came out and said, like, in so many words, this person is a misogynist. And, I mean, that appears from time to time in the book, and it felt good to write that. But yeah, I do think he meant like maybe do a little more interpreting. He also might have said that though, because the manuscript I sent him was 550 pages, and he was like, "What's the point?" You know?
Well, I'm curious because it seems as though you're, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm curious around the sense that after having done such extensive research on how the loss of one person has had those ripples, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like I'm hungry to know, like, what is the impact? Like, I mean, obviously, I'm sure that's in there, but is it, like, how much was that, like, the lesson or the learning or the finding of this endeavor, right? This fact-finding mission.
Well, I mean, having watched it from, like, the outside, inside, whatever, like, so much of it is organic and intuitive and, like, alchemy and all of this, because, like, you know, my memory of the process of it is, like, oh my gosh, and, like, Leon went to the University of Chicago, and like also, and then like the lawyer, like his mom was like in this, was this author, and she was reading this book, and I was like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, well, I didn't say that out loud because I was like, you're kidding, but I was over here being like, I don't know how this is all gonna like make sense. So that really was happening, and you know, like she's telling the story in only the way that like Sarah would tell it, because like I would never think to make those particular connections and all of this, the way that you create the narrative and the things that are like not obvious to me that are relevant, that you know in the final book really do make a lot of sense. And I totally lost my train of thought here, but like I like even the examples that I was making, like as I read it now, I'm like, holy shit, that's incredible, like how connected all of this stuff is. I had forgotten, like, for example, even with my own life, that like their mom had bought my childhood dollhouse at a garage sale before I met her. And then like, so they had my childhood dollhouse when we became friends, and I was like, this is weird, you know, so there's this synchronicity to our lives and to so many of these factors that is just kind of like beautiful and interesting to see in the final product. That's completely a result of the lens through which, you know, you're doing it. Yeah. But I think also, and more interestingly, especially with like true crime stuff, you know, like it's all about the salaciousness and like, oh, but they totally did it. And, or like, who did it? Who could do it? You know, and it's like so, like, I mean, that's what true crime is doing, and I'm not gonna like talk down about it, but like in real life, it's never that simple. And it's always nuanced, it's always complicated. There is not like one thing and then it's like, yes, it's solved and justice is served and everything is okay now. Like, it's not like that. There's tragedy to all of the layers of it, and there's complexity. This is not just one bad apple who did one bad thing. It's a result of so much more than that. And by threading the needle the way that you do and making those connections, like I was giving, for example, like I didn't know about, I was like, why is this race riot stuff going in there? You know, because of my white privilege. But then like you put it in context to Render being even more privileged, because we were still like Florida white trash and they were like fancy, you know, Nyack people. And, you know, so it really does become so relevant to have these layers of privilege and all of these different factors that ultimately are very related, but are not maybe obviously related to the why these bad and tragic things happen, right? If the solution is not like, let's just round up all of the bad apples and get rid of them, it's like we have to fix these other areas of our society, so that we don't keep bruising these apples, you know? And that's like a long-winded way of saying, like, you did that, and I don't know how you did it, because also I'm like having conversations with you, and I don't think that you always know what you're doing. No. You know? It's like, it's very intuitive.
Oh, who does?
No one. I mean, if I could figure out how to conjure the muse, you know, consistently, like, but it comes from something else, and you just channel it. Yeah. But, you know, you did that in a way that I found very satisfying. Some people on Goodreads didn't, so you can't make everyone happy.
Well, I blocked Goodreads because somebody said that this murder...
Everyone's gonna go on Goodreads and give it 5 stars.
Yeah.
Just
no,
to
I had
be
to
like
block
nice.
it in my browser because I got so angry at this one review that, I mean, I hope the Goodreads trolls don't come for me when I say this, but they were like, this murder wasn't unsolved and it wasn't particularly sensational, so this book didn't need to be written 1 star.
Yeah. Or like, the other ones are like, I don't see how this book would be interesting to anyone who didn't know her.
Can you imagine saying that? I can't, no.
It's
anyway,
wild.
It's wild, people are crazy. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. Sarah, you talked about the structure of the book. You talked to so many people, and you mentioned the word fact a lot. And I'm kind of wondering, just on like the sentence and paragraph level, how you turned like facts into narrative, like how you made scenes from like these just like disparate moments.
Yeah, well, one example of that is I interviewed one of Carolyn's childhood best friends, Paula, and she told me this beautiful story, which Pamela can expand on, about how she and Carolyn and another friend of theirs drove from the west coast of Florida to the east coast to watch the sun set and then watch it rise. And as she's telling me this story, she's showing me photographs that they took that night, like with a disposable camera as they were sleeping on the beach, and describing them for me, because I was like, couldn't always tell what things were. It was like dark and the flash and everything. And I was like, what's that? And she said, like, I think that's a piece of seaweed. And I was like, what's this? And she was like, I think it's a bag of peach gummies that somebody brought. And so then when I turned that into a scene, I just said, like somebody took a picture of a piece of seaweed. Somebody brought peach gummies, you know? And I mean, it really just became, that's how you turn the material of those interviews into like scenes, because it gives you what did it taste like? It tasted like peach gummies, right? Like, what did it smell like? It smelled like rotting seaweed, and you know. And then they slept in the sand, and then they got up the next morning all tired, and yeah. So it was a lot of that, and like asking for those details. If somebody, you know, said they hung out with her in her room, her teenage bedroom, what did it look like? How did she decorate her teenage bedroom? You know, and then I can just write that as a scene of them hanging out in her teenage bedroom. Yeah. And like describe it as if I'm there, even though I've never been there. It's like through that other person's memory. Do you want to talk more about that drive across the state?
Yeah, I mean, this is like another thing that's really cool about this book existing. Like, I didn't know that she did that, and so for whatever reason, reading those pages or drafts of those pages, and I was like, what? We did that first. And so, like, I'll also just say, like, Carrie, even though she was, you know, younger than Jenny and I, like, she was still kind of intimidating. Even now, like, in my mind, like, it's like, oh my God, she really thought we were cool. Like, she did what we did. But Jenny and I, and another friend of ours, did that first. We were like, oh, it would be really cool if we, like, watch the sunset on the Gulf and then drive to Cocoa Beach and watch the sunrise on the East Coast. And we went, and so we did that, and we slept on the beach, and we were also like 16 or 17 at the time. And when we were there, we were like, okay, so we only have $30, and so we get gas back, and we're starving. Like, what do we do? And that was how I learned that you can just like walk into any hotel and act like you are staying there and eat the continental breakfast. And that was like, you know, a really cool, very core memory of mine. And I'm reading how Carrie did the exact same thing with her friends. And how surreal is that, you know, to like be able to learn about these things that I otherwise would have like no idea about. You know, and her keeping like the ticket stub that I had signed for her, and like, you know, just stuff like that I'm learning through other people's memories, like the impact like that I or you know, Jenny or whomever like had on her life, and that she was not maybe telling me like, oh my God, that was so special, and like that really had an influence on me or whatever. I'm like learning it through these other narratives, and yeah, it's just this like amazing tapestry that all of our lives are, right? Like I wish that like everybody who leaves us too soon is like able to have this document of like all of the not all of it, but like so many of these amazing moments that make up a life, and the magic of that, right? You know, like we used to play this thing called the birthday game, and and basically it was like roasting the birthday person with like your favorite, most embarrassing stories about them. So mine always involved like peeing in public, like, because I'll pop a squat anywhere, don't tell the cops. You know, stuff like that, right? That is like so unique and specific to a person, that makes you laugh and makes, you know, you feel like seen and called out at the same time. And that was like always our birthday tradition with us and other friends. And, you know, it's just like, this is like the epic version of that, you know, the good, the bad, and all of it. So.
Yeah, I think the thing about, you know, turning real people into characters in a book is that in order to do it, like you said, I mean, you could edit the photos so much that it doesn't even look like them anymore, but maybe they think they're more, you know. But also it's that, like, it's a person's flaws that really make you love them, and it's like those,
Idiosyncrasies.
Those idiosyncrasies, yeah, exactly. And like maybe they're less flattering moments, or, you know, that little, I don't know, their biting sense of humor that maybe cuts too deep sometimes, or, you know, but it's so distinct to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the things, like, I was talking about this with Claire, because, like, when Carrie took my candy bar, like, you'll get it when you read the book. I remember, and I was talking to a friend of ours that knew the new Carrie, or not yours, mine and Carrie's, that came to the reading in New York City last night, and I was like reliving it, and I was so mad about it, right? Like, I was like, why'd you fucking do that? And apparently I told Claire, like, because Carrie was staying with her, I was like, well, watch out, she'll take your shit. Like, you know, so I was obviously, like, not over it, right? And then the way that Carrie made it up to me is she got me, like, a very thoughtful birthday gift and a very sweet, like, letter. And you know, it was so endearing, and I was over it, right? But I was annoyed and and it's endearing at the same time, right? She had the funniest response because I, like, texted her, like, did you take my candy bar? And she was like, I have a problem, and then, like, all the candy emojis. But see, even that, like, learning, like, her parents talking about her having a candy problem, you start to see, like, it's affirming that, like, your experience of this person is also, like, other people's experiences of them, and that feels really nice. But yeah, like, those things that annoy you or frustrate you are also the things that you, like, love about that person.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I wanted Carolyn to be, like, as real as possible, you know, in the book. I didn't want to reduce her by, you know, smoothing over those things.
Yeah, and that's what she would have wanted, you know, authenticity was really, like, our value system.
Exactly.
So.
Thank you.
We're hanging out.
Yeah, we're gonna stick around.
And you'll be signing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for caring.
We're gonna stay here for a minute. Thanks.
Yeah.